Malaria. Malaria was a disease that came about, and when it first came, it just completely wiped out the human population. There were only a few people that survived. It just came about, and people didn't really know how to survive it because they never had it before. So it just wiped out a whole bunch of people, and the survival of the fittest survived. The ones with the best immune system survived. The ones that could survive malaria survived. And um, pretty soon, humans began to evolve and be able to adapt to malaria. And the first thing that humans did to evolve to malaria were they had this gene. It's called the HBB gene. And in this HBB gene, there was a single nucleotide polymorphism, which just means that one nucleotide in the DNA of this gene changed. And this happened to be the HBS. And on this allele, the glutamic acid changed to lysine at codon 6. And this change is what introduces sickle cell anemia. So, because of sickle cell, the malaria parasite was unable to bind and change the red blood cells of the affected human, and the human did not get malaria. They were not affected by malaria. This change is found most often in the Saharan Africa and the Middle East, and it was the first human genetic variant. And they researchers don't really know how it protects against malaria. They just know that people with sickle cell, whether heterozygous or homozygous, are protected against it. Obviously, it's better to have heterozygous because then you won't have sickle cell. So, once this occurred, obviously, this isn't as prevalent today because if it was prevalent today, then you'd see a bunch of people with sickle cell anemia. So, eventually, malaria adapted to this resistance. Malaria resistance, malaria change happens because when a mosquito bites a human, the malaria parasite enters the body from the mosquito's salivary glands. And then when the mosquito draws the blood from the person that they bit, the parasites are taken into the mosquito's gut. So sometimes this occurs, it doesn't always occur, but the parasite, the malaria parasite, taken into the mosquito's gut. And in the gut, the parasites reproduce asexually, which this reproduction creates variations of malaria, which these variations of malaria are what creates your resistance. Sometimes when a mosquito injects malaria, they actually end up picking up two different parasites of malaria, and then those two reproduce and create a different strand of malaria. So that's where your malaria resistance occurs. So once malaria became resistant to the HBS allele, malaria or humans adapted again because the human body is awesome. It can just adapt to this different thing. So there was another single nucleotide polymorphism on the HBB gene, and it's called the HBC allele change. And this is the same change as the past, where the glutamic acid changed the lysine substitution at the codon 6. So that just means that one letter changes on the sixth codon. And this change is very prominent in West Africa. It's less common than the HBS change, and it's not as effect. Humans are not as affected if they have homozygous as they are with sickle cell, and heterozygous has no effect. But and this change, if you're heterozygous or homozygous with this allele, you are still protected. You are protected from malaria. because this change causes an increased immune clearance of infected red blood cells. So when malaria comes and infects your red blood cells and attacks your red blood cells, this change, this allele change, this SNP, as they call them, nucleotide polymorphism, clears out the infected red blood cells so that it doesn't affect you. So yeah, that was just another variation that happens in America. Not in America, in humans. That was another evolutionary change that occurred. And then malaria did its adapting thing again, where it reproduced and created different variations. Keep in mind that when the parasite is entered into the blood, into the erythrocytes, and then it gets rejected, the when the mosquito draws up that parasite, it also has that rejection in it. So that's how, when they reproduce, that's how their rejections get into the DNA of the parasite, and that's how they become resistant. So that occurred again, and new strains happened again, different strains. And then after that, the last variation that is known right now is the HB allele, and that occurs on the HBB gene again. And this is one is a little bit different. It's where the glutamic acid changed to lysine on the codon 26. So at codon 26, there's a letter change. And this is prominent in Southeast Asia, which is a little bit different. And it's relatively recent, so it's one of the most recent SNPs that they have. And if you have this allele and you're homozygous, you have anemia, which really isn't too bad. But the reason why this occurs, they don't really know. Scientists don't really know why humans are resistant to malaria with this allele change. They don't really know why. So then, yeah, that's about it. But we do know that the red blood cells in this allele change are resistant to the invasion by the P. falciparum, which is just a form of malaria. Um, and then I'm sure eventually malaria is gonna do its whole, oh, let's reproduce, and then that's gonna like create another different strain of malaria, and then humans are gonna have to adapt again so that they can survive. Yeah.